The Mongols reached the capital in 34 minutes and left in 3 days because they wanted acknowledgment. The Romans reached Manhattan in 6 hours, built a fortified camp, solved the water problem, won the negotiation, and left in 18 days because withdrawal was the strategically correct decision. Washington, D.C. is not Manhattan. It is 68 square miles of flat terrain, with the most symbolically important buildings in the world, the most concentrated military infrastructure of any city on Earth, and a river system that'll recognize engineering corps will recognize immediately as something they have crossed before. The Mongols wanted a symbol, the Romans want a strategic position, and the difference between those two objectives will determine whether this campaign ends in 3 days or 3 months. The Roman force crossing into Virginia at 3 a.m. is different from the force that came to Manhattan. The Manhattan campaign was a vanguard, 50,000 legionaries, 1 legion's worth of force. The D.C. campaign is the main army, 3 full legions, 150,000 soldiers, plus the auxiliary forces, cavalry units, specialist archers, additional engineering cohorts, a full siege train with 40 ballistae and 12 onagers capable of hurling 50-pound stones through the walls of any structure built before the 20th century. The Roman general commanding this force has the intelligence report from the Manhattan campaign, translated through the same NSA linguist chain that handled that negotiation, and he has drawn 2 conclusions from it. First, the Americans have overwhelming ranged firepower at distance, but are constrained in using it freely around civilian populations. Second, the Americans negotiated when presented with a fortified position they couldn't assault without unacceptable cost. The D.C. campaign is designed to create that position faster, larger, and closer to the most important symbols of American power than Manhattan ever was. The Potomac River crossing happens at 4 a.m. at 3 points simultaneously. The same multiple crossing strategy the Romans used to cross the Rhine, the Danube, and the Thames. The engineering cohorts have been constructing pontoon bridges since 2 a.m., using timber from the Virginia woodlands south of the city. A construction technique so well practiced that a Roman engineering unit can bridge a 400-foot river in under 3 hours. The Potomac at the crossing points is 900 feet wide. The Romans begin at 2 a.m. and complete 3 functional bridges by 4:47 a.m. The first American surveillance assets, a Predator drone from Joint Base Andrews, spot the bridge construction at 3:15 a.m., and the alert goes to the Pentagon at 3:22 a.m. The president is awake at 3:31 a.m. The Roman vanguard is already across the river at 3:44 a.m. The margin this time is not 4 minutes. It is negative. The Romans are inside the district before the president finishes his first briefing. The Pentagon response is faster than anything in either previous D.C. scenario because the Pentagon has now run this exact scenario twice. The Rapid Reaction Protocol activated at 3:44 a.m. deploys Fort Myer forces into Arlington, seals the 14th Street Bridge from the Virginia side, and gets Apache helicopters airborne from Davison Army Airfield in 8 minutes. What the protocol was not designed for is 3 simultaneous crossing points. The Roman 3-pronged advance, 1 column moving northeast toward the Capitol, 1 moving north toward the White House, 1 moving northwest to cut off the Maryland exits, is a standard Roman envelopment maneuver. It is also a maneuver that requires the American defensive force to respond in 3 directions simultaneously with assets that were positioned to respond in 1. The Rapid Reaction Protocol covers 1 crossing. The Romans planned for the protocol. Hour 2. The column moving toward the Capitol reaches the National Mall at 5:15 a.m. The column moving toward the White House reaches the Ellipse at 5:30 a.m. The column moving northwest reaches the Maryland border at 5:45 a.m., sealing the primary evacuation corridor that the Mongol campaign revealed as the critical civilian exit route. The Capitol Police Evacuation Protocol, which successfully evacuated Congress in the Mongol scenario, is activated at 3:44 a.m. and completes at 5:12 a.m., 3 minutes before the Roman column reaches the mall. The Capitol is empty. The White House is empty. Marine One lifted off at 4:15 a.m., 90 minutes earlier than in the Mongol scenario, because the updated protocol moved the presidential evacuation timeline forward. The Romans enter both buildings simultaneously at 5:47 a.m. and find them exactly as the Mongols found them. Lights on, empty, everything intact. The Roman centurion who enters the Oval Office this time does not sit in the chair. He measures the room, he notes the exits, he posts guards, he leaves hour 3. The engineering corps begins fortifying the National Mall simultaneously from both ends. The Washington Monument becomes the central axis of the Roman camp. Its height makes it the best observation platform in the city, and Roman military doctrine places the observation post at the center of any fortified position. A unit of 20 legionaries reaches the base of the Washington Monument at 5:52 a.m. and begins ascending the internal staircase, 897 steps, in full armor. They reach the observation windows at the top at 6:14 a.m. And what the decurion in command sees from 555 feet above the mall is something no Roman commander has ever seen, and something that no military commander in history could have fully prepared for. The entire city laid out below him, every road, every building. The Pentagon across the river to the southwest, a building so large it has its own zip code. The river systems, the bridges, the sight lines. He begins sketching a map in the wax tablet he carries for exactly this purpose. The map he produces in the next 40 minutes will be the most strategically valuable document produced in either the Mongol or Roman campaigns. Hour 6. The fortified camp on the National Mall is the most impressive military construction that American commanders watching drone footage have ever seen built from scratch. The Romans have used the mall's existing geography brilliantly. The reflecting pools become defensive water barriers on the north and south flanks. The tree lines become concealment for artillery positions. The museum buildings become fortified strong points with elevated firing positions accessible from the roof. The camp covers the entire 1.9-mile length of the mall from the Lincoln Memorial to the Capitol steps. It is larger than any position the Romans held in Manhattan. It is also, military engineers note, better positioned. The mall is essentially a purpose-built Roman military campus, long and narrow with defined flanks, clear fields of fire in all directions, and symbolic structures at both ends that the Roman commander clearly understands have value beyond their military utility. Day 1 ends with the American military in a position that the Manhattan campaign prepared them for intellectually, but not emotionally. The Romans hold the National Mall. They hold the Capitol. They hold the White House. Though they are not occupying it, merely controlling access to it. They have sealed the Maryland corridor. They have cut the city in two along the axis of the mall. The military perimeter that the rapid reaction protocol established has been outmaneuvered not by speed, but by geometry. The Roman three-pronged advance created a situation where the American defensive perimeter, designed to contain a threat coming from one direction, is now surrounding a Roman position that is inside the perimeter rather than outside it. The Pentagon is holding a meeting at 11 p.m. that has one agenda item. How do you besiege a force that is already inside your defensive lines and sitting on the most symbolically important real estate in the country? Day 2. The Roman general descends from the Washington Monument at dawn and conducts a personal inspection of the mall camp. He walks the full 1.9 miles from the Lincoln Memorial to the Capitol steps, accompanied by his senior tribunes and the engineering cohort commanders. He stops at each museum. He enters the Smithsonian National Museum of American History and spends 47 minutes inside, longer than any other stop on the inspection. What he sees in the museum is a complete material history of the civilization he is currently occupying. He sees the original Star-Spangled Banner. He sees George Washington's uniform. He sees the progression of American military equipment from muskets to missiles. He does not know what most of it is. He knows it is a temple to military history because every great civilization builds exactly this kind of temple. And he knows that a civilization that builds this temple has been at war, has won those wars, and has preserved the evidence of winning them. He leaves the museum and immediately doubles the guard on every approach to the camp. Day 3. The civilian crisis begins earlier than in Manhattan because Washington, D.C. has a resident population of 700,000 people and a daytime population that swells to over 1 million. The Roman position on the mall has effectively divided the city, Residents south of the mall cannot reach the north. Residents north cannot reach the south without passing through or around a 1.9-mile fortified Roman military camp. The city's infrastructure, water, power, communications, continues functioning because those systems run underground and the Romans have not touched them. But the physical movement of people, goods, and emergency services across the mall corridor has stopped. Hospitals on one side cannot receive patients from the other side. Food deliveries are disrupted. The 40,000 federal workers who commute into the Capitol Hill area cannot reach their offices. The economic and logistical disruption of the Roman position is not caused by Roman aggression. It is caused by Roman presence. The camp is simply there, in the middle of everything, functioning perfectly. And by functioning perfectly, it is breaking everything around it. Day 5. The supply question arrives faster in D.C. than in Manhattan, because 150,000 soldiers require significantly more food than 50,000. The Roman general anticipated this. His supply calculation on day 1 gave him 17 days of grain rations per soldier, the standard legion deployment supply. 150,000 soldiers at standard ration consumption requires approximately 150 tons of grain per day. The mall's museums and surrounding buildings contain food service infrastructure, cafeterias, vending machines, restaurant supplies, that the Romans have been systematically cataloging since day 1. The total food supply within the perimeter is approximately 4 days of supplement at the consumption rate of 150,000 soldiers. The general's supply math gives him 21 days total before food becomes critical. 21 days is enough time to negotiate almost anything. The general knows this because the Manhattan After Action report, which he has read through the NSA interpreter chain, told him that the Manhattan general extended his timeline by negotiating a food supply from the American side. He intends to do the same thing, but he intends to negotiate from a stronger position than Manhattan, because he has something Manhattan didn't. The Capitol building, the White House, and the Washington Monument all within his perimeter simultaneously. Day 7. The Roman envoy arrives at the American perimeter at the 14th Street Bridge at 9 a.m. carrying a white flag and a message written in Latin on a wax tablet. The translation, completed by the NSA linguist team in 23 minutes, produces a document that the Secretary of State reads 3 times before speaking. The message is not a demand, it is a proposal. The Roman general proposes the establishment of a formal negotiating framework, specific location, specific time, specific agenda, for discussions about the status of the Roman military presence in the city. The proposal includes a unilateral offer. During the negotiation period, the Roman force will not expand its perimeter, will not damage any structure within its control, and will actively facilitate the movement of medical personnel and emergency services across the mall corridor. It is the most sophisticated opening diplomatic communication that anyone in the State Department has received from a non-state actor in living memory. The Secretary of State's comment, recorded in the meeting minutes, is, "Whoever trained this general trained him well." Day 10. The negotiation is happening in the Russell Senate Office Building, chosen because it is equidistant from the Roman perimeter and the American command post, and because the Romans, upon being shown photographs of the building, indicated through the interpreter chain that they recognized it as a building for collective governance and considered it appropriate. The Roman general attends in full military dress. The American delegation attends in suits. The interpreters sit between them. The first 3 sessions are procedural, establishing the ground rules, confirming the ceasefire terms, agreeing on the communication protocols. The 4th session is where the negotiation becomes genuinely interesting. The Roman general asks, through the interpreter, one question that nobody on the American side was prepared for. He asks, "What is this place for? Not the building, the city. What is Washington, D.C. for?" The American diplomat, who answers, a career Foreign Service officer with 30 years of experience, says it is the seat of government of the most powerful nation on earth. The Roman general considers this for a long moment, then he says, "So was Rome." Day 14. The negotiation has produced a framework agreement that addresses the immediate practical issues. The mall corridor will be open to civilian movement through designated crossing points. Food will be delivered to the Roman camp in exchange for a reduction of the northwestern perimeter. Medical services will be restored across the divided city. The harder question, what does the Roman general actually want, has taken 10 days of negotiation to answer clearly. What he wants is not territory, not tribute, not the humiliation of the American government. He wants what every Roman general who successfully concluded a campaign wanted, a triumph. In Roman military tradition, a triumph was the formal public recognition of a military achievement, a procession, a ceremony, an acknowledgment by the governing authority of the territory that the Roman force had demonstrated its capability. He wants the United States government to formally acknowledge, in a document, that the Roman legion entered Washington, D.C., held the National Mall for 14 days, and conducted itself according to the laws of war. He wants the history to be written correctly. He wants Rome to be remembered. Day 17. The acknowledgment document is signed in the Russell Senate Office Building by the Secretary of State on behalf of the United States government and by the Roman general on behalf of the legion. It is one paragraph. It states that a Roman military force entered the District of Columbia, established a military presence on the National Mall, from the Lincoln Memorial to the Capitol, maintained that presence for 7 days without causing civilian casualties or property damage, and withdrew voluntarily upon the conclusion of diplomatic negotiations. The document is classified top secret for 25 years, not because its contents are strategically sensitive, but because no one in the government wants to explain to the American public that the United States formally acknowledged a Roman military occupation of the National Mall. The Roman general accepts the document, reviews the Latin translation prepared by the NSA linguists, makes 2 corrections to the Latin grammar, and signs it. Day 18. The Romans withdraw exactly as they came, across 3 pontoon bridges over the Potomac, in formation, in good order, with their standards raised and their eagle emblems at the front of each column. The withdrawal takes 6 hours for 150,000 soldiers and their equipment. The American commanders watching from the Virginia side count the columns as they cross. The last Roman soldier crosses the Potomac at 3:17 p.m. The bridges are disassembled behind them, not because the Romans couldn't leave them standing, but because leaving a bridge is leaving infrastructure for an enemy to use. The Romans built 3 bridges in under 3 hours and disassembled them in under 2. The engineering cohort commander who supervised both operations files his report that evening. The report notes, in the matter-of-fact Latin of a professional military document, that the Potomac River presented no significant engineering challenges and that the timber available in the Virginia woodlands was of adequate quality for military bridging purposes. The most significant military event in American history since Pearl Harbor is recorded by the people who conducted it as a routine engineering exercise. What the Roman campaign revealed that the Mongol campaign didn't is visible in the comparison. The Mongols came with 800,000 warriors and held 4 square miles for 3 days before logistics broke them. The Romans came with 150,000 soldiers and held the entire symbolic core of the American capital for 18 days before choosing to leave. The Mongols were broken by the island. The Romans were never broken. They left because the general decided leaving was correct. The fundamental difference is not numbers or weapons or tactics. It is institutional knowledge. The Roman legion was not an army of warriors. It was an institution, a system of training, doctrine, engineering, logistics, and strategic thinking that had been refined over 500 years before the first legionary crossed the Potomac. The American military that responded to the Roman campaign is itself an institution refined over 250 years. 2 institutions met on the National Mall for 18 days and neither one broke. They negotiated. They found terms both could accept. They parted. The most sophisticated military organization of the ancient world and the most powerful military of the modern world looked at each other across a negotiating table in the Russell Senate Office Building and reached the same conclusion. The other side was worth respecting. History is full of wars between people who couldn't manage that. The National Mall still has the indentations from Roman tent stakes in the grass near the Lincoln Memorial. The grounds crew fills them in every spring. They keep coming back. Subscribe because the next legion has already chosen its city.